Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. It's the Friday before Week 13 in the NFL. We are doing our regular NFL rundown with Ted Savransky, professional sports bettor, a.k.a. also known as Teddy Covers. We run down the card, ATS, and then totals. Right now, we're going to look at totals. Teddy Covers, the first thing I want to ask you about, right? Arizona and Cincinnati. Arizona's playing St. Louis. Cincinnati's playing Cleveland. Both Arizona and Cincinnati are teams that have high-powered, explosive offenses, but they're also both coming off of games where they got nice wins in sort of a lower-scoring, grinded-out kind of game, and they're both playing teams again where that might be the style of play again. They both went under last week, and I'm thinking we might see roughly carbon copies of what we saw last week again. And even though the totals on both those games aren't that high, maybe we take a shot with the under on both of them, Arizona, St. Louis, and Cincinnati, Cleveland.
I don't want the over in either one. I'll tell you that much. And of course, you talked about the two good teams. Let's talk about the two bad teams. The Rams' offensive line. It's not just a mess. It's an utterly hideous unit right now. And I mean, the St. Louis, they can't run block for Gurley. Gurley had only 9 carries last week because they couldn't run
Right.
block for him. They fell behind. Obviously, that's a problem. And when it comes to protecting the quarterback, whoever's behind center this week, Foles, Keenum, doesn't matter. They've been taking hits. They're under pressure. And at this stage, they're just chucking it up to try to avoid some of the hits they've been taking. I don't trust the Rams to score points, certainly not to score a whole bunch of points. And that won't have me betting an over in that game against, even though the Cardinals defense, it's taken a step or two back in recent weeks. Arizona's defense has had some injuries. They're not as good as they were a month ago, but I don't trust St. Louis to score. It's a similar story with Cleveland. I mean, you really want to bet an over with a third-string quarterback going up against an elite defense? Not me. And I know that Davis was okay last year with St. Louis in a backup role. I know he started a handful of games for the Rams a season ago, but he is a third-string quarterback on a very bad football team. That tells you all you need to know. Those aren't the type of quarterbacks that I tend to look for over wagers.
All right, so it sounds like you're leaning under in both games, but not necessarily firmly liking the under in either game yet.
Yeah, I mean, in both games, if I had to play a total, I would look under before. I would not even consider the over in either contest.
Okay, and then I want to ask about Jags and Titans. I've kind of been leaning overs with the Jaguars all year long and generally been doing pretty well with that. Of course, they have a passing game that is pretty good, and their totals tend to be relatively modest. And we have sort of a similar situation here with the Titans. I know that Allen Hurns is out for the Jags. That does hurt them. How much, I'm not exactly sure, but I don't know. Once again, I'm feeling like it's another, lean towards the over with a Jags game. How much am I liking it? Not exactly sure. The Titans, not awesome offensively, but I definitely like Mariota. They definitely feel like they're a team that is going to fight the whole way through. And I'm thinking that one way or another, the game is more likely to go over than not. Jags-Titans over. What do you think about that one, Teddy Covers?
I certainly wouldn't try to talk you out of it.
Okay.
And remember, these two teams played a couple of weeks back on a couple of weeks back on a Thursday night. Was a very ugly football game. The Jags won 19-13. Both teams squandered numerous red zone chances. Neither offense moved the ball effectively. So now we have a short turnaround rematch, but this time both teams have a full week to prepare. There's been a lot of talk in Tennessee this week about getting the ball to their wide receivers. They've been talking about the wide receivers underachieving. And of course, the Titans do have some playmakers on the outside, something that the Jags have even without Hurns in the lineup this week. And look, this is a Jag squad that, Bortles is good for a pick six every week, and he's good for a touchdown every week. They've had a lot of red zone issues, and that's my biggest concern here is that neither of these two teams is particularly strong in the red zone. That'd be my biggest concern here. But in terms of the two offenses' ability to move the ball up and down the field, I wouldn't be surprised if we do, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a handful of big plays in this one, which may take some of the red zone issues out of the equation.
All right. So again, sounds like you're leaning over, but stopping short of firmly saying you like it.
Yes. The truth of it is that, look, when it comes to December NFL, I'm not peppering the board with bets, not size, not totals. If you find a handful of good bets every week,
Right.
you're very pleased. This is not a time of year where I'm going willy-nilly up and down the board betting every lean or opinion that I have. It's a time of year where I'm finding a handful of good wagers and betting them significantly.
Awesome analysis, Teddy Covers. And then the last game I want to ask about in terms of totals is the Monday night game, right? Dallas and Washington. Now, Romo's out for Dallas. I'm sure that is part of why the total for this game is relatively low. It's around 42. And, Washington, has been pretty decent on offense with Kirk Cousins. Castle coming in for Dallas, at a serviceable quarterback. Obviously he's not going to lead them to a Super Bowl. Is he going to be able to lead them to, putting up maybe 18, 20 points reliably week in and week out? I think maybe so. And I'm thinking maybe we see an over in Dallas, Washington on Monday night with a very low total, at least at first glance.
I'm not in love with that pick, and in fact, I would definitely lean under before I lead over in this contest. Look, Castle has had this starting job before this year, and the offense didn't work.
Right.
And it didn't work on a pretty consistent basis. He had 1 or 2 games where he was serviceable. Most of the time, he was pretty bad. And with the ability to run against the Redskins, I would think that the Cowboys would come with a fairly conservative offensive approach here. This Dallas defense is still pretty good, and they've had effort issues at times. But on Monday night against a divisional rival, I expect them to come to play. The one thing that the Redskins were able to do last week, they were able to get Deshaun Jackson involved in the offense, which, I haven't even heard his name in a couple of months. He's been banged up,
right.
Which is a concern. But Washington defensively, they're vulnerable against the run. I would anticipate they're going to try to get their ground game going as well. So lean under as a first look on Monday night, but let's see where this line goes between now and
exactly.
Monday.
My only reason that I was leaning over on it was just because the total was a little bit surprisingly low to me. I would have expected something more like 44-ish. Interesting thoughts as always, Teddy Covers. Is there anything else from the NFL Week 13 card that you'd like to bring to our attention as far as totals?
Let's talk about Indy and Pittsburgh on Sunday night.
That's an interesting one because Pitt, I'll tell you, Pitt, we think of them as having like a very explosive offense, but they've actually at home been an under-trender this year.
They've been an under-trender everywhere this year. They're 3-8 to the under this season. And yet I would call the Steelers the number 1 over team in the NFL right now. In part because of that 3-8 to the under that has left us with very reasonable totals to bet with Pittsburgh. They don't have, this isn't one of those teams that have been cashing overs every week and the markets are going nuts and saying, look at Pittsburgh, watch out for this offense. But we know what this downfield passing game is capable of doing. They've done it twice in their last 3 games. They did it to Oakland, they did it to Seattle. In between, they hung 30 on Cleveland. But what we saw, loaded with playmakers, an offense that's designed to get the ball into the playmakers' hands fairly quickly, a quarterback who can get it there, and he doesn't have a pass rush, and he doesn't have a strong secondary. Pittsburgh's going to get theirs on Sunday night. The question is, are the Colts going to get theirs? Well, let's look at this Steelers pass defense. The last 3 games, they let Derek Carr throw 4 touchdowns, 300 yards against them. They let Johnny Manziel throw for a career-high 372 yards against them. And, of course, last week, Russell Wilson, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and Pittsburgh couldn't hold a second-half lead on multiple occasions in that game because their secondary couldn't stop anyone. So, yeah, I'm looking for a Sunday night shootout. We've seen more than our fair share of highly entertaining, wild, high-scoring Sunday night games this year. I think we see another one this week. Look for the Colts and Steelers to go over the total.
Even though it's kind of a high total, like 48.5 now, right?
Yeah, I would bet this sooner rather than later.
Right.
49s are already starting to pop up, and it may well go higher.
Teddy Covers, awesome thoughts. As always, thanks so much. We'll do this again next week for NFL Week 14.